Hi guys and welcome back to another review. This time around I'm bringing you the Hisenior Cano Cristales. This is the latest from Hisenior. It's a 2+8. What that means is that we have two dynamic drivers. I believe they are 8mm employed in a quasi-isobaric setup, being backed up by 8 BAs divided between the mids, upper mids, treble, in a new configuration for Hisenior. Hisenior, let's call it previous hybrid or pure hybrid, was the Okavango, which I have here on the right hand side. That was a 1+6. They also have the Mega 5P, which is a 1+4, and then they have the Mega 5 EST series, which are tribrids. Anyway, the Cano Cristales, this is priced at around $300, $399. My apologies. So it's within, I would say, what is to be expected of similar configurations by other brands, and to be expected as well. At this price, we then have a set of accessories and so on that try to justify the price. We have a nice case which Hisenior has been using lately, and I actually have to say that I do prefer this case to this one, which is the other one that they also use, although the sturdiness, obviously this one on the right hand side is way more sturdier, but this one just looks more classy, and I think it's suited for, let's say, the more polished products, if that is maybe the correct way of putting it. We have a nice cable which has exchangeable nozzles, and then we also have a nice selection of tips. I did take the opportunity to try the Cano Cristales with a number of different tips, in an attempt to find maybe some significant difference that would have been beneficial, but I ultimately opted for the stock ones in the medium size, as these allowed me to actually fit the IM deep into my ear canal, and the depth of the insertion of this IM, as with other IMs, is in my opinion the main thing that we should, or that potential parties interested in buying the Cano Cristales should keep in mind. Because the difference between having the Cano Cristales, let's say, fitting normally in your IM, normally in your ear, and then you are able to deep fit it, the difference in sound will be significant, especially in the area of, let's say, 2 to 8 kilohertz. There will be a big shift in how that part of the spectrum does come across. Anyway, in terms of construction and how the IM looks, it's a work of art. I mean, it looks really fancy, let's put it that way. It's got a nice design faceplate, this purple color shell, and the faceplate. Obviously, you also still have the ability to have them custom made to your own personal taste if you want. It just looks, it looks really nice. This, let's say, standard configuration in terms of appearance that they have selected is a nice take. The IM in terms of size, it's not a huge IM when you consider the number of drivers. I mean, there are 10 drivers in here, and it actually fits surprisingly for an IM of this size really well. At least in my ears, I did not have any issues, and as I said, I was actually able to fit them nice and deep, and I think a lot of, to a great extent, the part of that is the fact that they use a relatively nice long nozzle, which has a good design to that length. And I think that's something that I've always really kind of enjoyed in Hisenior's products. They somehow always make the length of the nozzle be such that if you are able to have a deep insertion, the IM will permit it, and you will reap the benefits of that deep insertion. If you are not able to deep fit it for some reason, the IM still will fit you nicely. That's another characteristic that, for example, you find in a lot of the IMs from Panon and ISM. So in that aspect, top marks. I have to congratulate them. They work there properly. In terms of the sound, which is what we want to know, and how does it sound and how does it perform. Immediately when you listen to it, bass is what jumps to you. I mean, the bass is really the prominent thing here. I would say the bass immediately reminded me to a certain extent of the bass of things like the Tanzio the 10th anniversary. It reminded me as well to a certain extent of the bass, for example, of the Sound Giant, the DTE264. It also reminded me of the bass of the Punch Audio Martillo, but I'm not going to be doing that comparison here today. I'm going to be talking, solely on the Cano Cristales and how I feel it sounds and how I think, it's suited for a particular crowd of people. That comparison with other IEMs, if you guys then decide you are interested, I will then do it. Anyway, jumping back into the Cano Cristales, it's like I was saying, the bass, it's a very prominent bass. It's thick, it's lush, but at the same time, with with certain genres, you will find that a little bit of speed is lost. And maybe the fact that it's been tuned in the way that it's tuned is the reason for that. Maybe the selection of the drivers could have been slightly better, but rest assured, with certain genres like EDM and rap and so the more bass heavy genres, let's put it that way, the Cano Cristales will definitely impress. I'm not gonna go as far as saying it's a bass head IEM, but it is bass head capable, let's put it that way. In terms then of the mids, the upper mids and treble, we have a different approach. And here lies perhaps my only real nitpick towards the Cano Cristales. In a hybrid or in a tribrid or whatever multiple driver configuration you are using, you want there to always be a driver cohesion and matching that is flawless or as flawless as possible. That is ultimately what separates the properly tuned IEMs from the not so properly tuned IEMs. So you want to be able to listen to an IEM that has multiple drivers and get the impression that there's no time delay between any one of those drivers, that there's no driver that jumps out in front of the other, that there's a perfect balance in terms of volume and in terms of scaling attained between all these drivers. And as I said, that's where I feel that the Cano Cristales, with some genres, it loses its composure. It's nothing that I would say is a deal breaker, nothing that I would say is going to ultimately be problematic, because most of that happens when you really start cranking it up. So at mid to low volume levels, where by the way the Cano Cristales plays perfectly loud, it's got more than enough volume at mid volume, while some IEMs require you to give them a little bit more of power, let's put it that way, for them to come alive, or for them to maybe even clear their throats and actually feel balanced. The Cano Cristales feels balanced at lower volumes and at mid volumes, and it's when you start pushing it a little bit more, or you select certain genres, that you lose that composure. So like stuff like Azul from J Balvin or Merida by Refeccio, they all sound really good. I mean, Shape of My Heart by Alex BG, the remix, these are all EDM songs where the Cano Cristales is perfectly at home, and where that let's say driver coherence is not so significant. But when you go to something like Cinematic Vibe by Afterline, or maybe even Takedake Japanese Roots, let's say more vocal centric music, and another example I'm going to give to that is, for example, here, let me select here another song that was one that I also very much noticed. Swept Away by Carol Duboc is another one. It's in those genres which are a little bit more complex that then you start seeing and noticing the BAs, for example, standing out as with regards to the DDs, and where that matching of the drivers is perhaps not as polished as it could be, especially when you consider that we are talking about a product that is of this price range. Again, let me repeat, it's not something that's a deal breaker anyway, but I feel that maybe, just maybe, if the energy level given in the initial pin again had been just ever so slightly lower, I'm talking maybe 2 dBs lower, that coherence could have been perfectly attained, and thus get that matching of the drivers to sound flawless. That's my opinion. The other option that could have been used is what they did, for example, with regards to the Okavango. They had the switches, and to be honest, probably I think that this would have been the more viable option. I'm not going to say I was disappointed, but I was actually expecting the Okavango to also have switches, because the reality is the switches in the Okavango did make or did allow for the Okavango to be a little bit more versatile and please a wider variety of people with a wider variety of genres, while the Cano Cristales, by not having these switches, which could have affected, like I say, this area between the 2 to 4 kilohertz area a little bit, they could have made the IM more capable. They could have made it sound absolutely flawless with things like House of Groove by Eugene Groove, which it actually does sound really, really good with that song, to be totally fair. But they could have made it even sound better. They could have made Analog by Supernova and sound, again, perfect without any real flaw, but it could have taken it just one step closer and make it enter a realm where it starts being a hassle to other IMs which are significantly more expensive. And without wanting to delve too much into comparisons, like I said, I wasn't going to do. But for example, when you listen to the DTE 264, which is a 2 plus 6 plus 4, so not a similar configuration because it's got ESTs, but it's got 2 DDs, 6 BAs, and then 4 ESTs. When you listen to that IM, it is also tuned in a very, let's say, almost V-type way, like, by the way, the Cano Cristales is. The Cano Cristales, because of this not perfect driver cohesion, it occasionally comes across more as a V-shaped signature than a what I would call a bright signature with a prominent bass. But as I was saying, when you compare it to something like the DTE, and of course the DTE also costs $1,000, so it's 3 times the price, but you see that IM is capable of doing precisely this because of using ESTs, and because of the way they had to be careful how the BAs and the ESTs were matched. They had to make sure that it was bright, which it is, but that brightness was matched perfectly to the sound coming from the DDs, and thus have a sound that is a one wall of sound, as opposed to 2 or 3 walls of sound coming from the different drivers. And that's honestly the real only nitpick that I have here on the Cano Cristales. I have seen some people mention that they found the Cano Cristales to be perhaps a little bit excessively bright. I honestly did not encounter that to be an issue for me. I found that at the volumes that I like listening to, it was fine. Yes, 1 or 2 songs, that area there of 2 to 5, sometimes it wasn't that it was bright, it just was unpolished, okay? And I could detect that lack of polish was coming from the BAs. But then again, this is me again nitpicking. This is me being overly, let's say, zealous in an attempt to find faults, which I think will not be really a fault for many of you out there. As for the highs, I think that they have been more successful in the way that the highs have been tuned. So the bass is full, it's thick, it's lush. It just lacks a little bit of speed with certain genres. The mids are very forward at higher volumes, but at mid to low volumes, they maintain a very excellent composure, to be honest. And I can't really fault them at those lower volumes. The highs, I feel they are again very similar to the bass in terms of overall performance. They are clean, they are detailed, but on occasion they lack just a little bit extra of, twinklies and sparklies. It could be that they actually do have that twinklies and sparklies that I'm looking for, and my limited hearing doesn't allow me to pick up on it. But I feel that Hisenior in wanting not to make the highs be overly intense, they purposely tone down the higher frequencies, and I feel, like I said, that is perfectly matched with the bass. The little lack of micro details that might occur is in any way isn't, not a problem. I prefer lack of detail and or some lack of detail, and it's something that you can listen to for hours without any fatigue, than something that has loads of detail and you get tired of it very quickly and it sounds overly colored and overly fake. In terms of its technical aspects, I would say timbre and tonality, although a little bit colored because of that overemphasis of the bass, is probably the best characteristic that they have, and as well then the soundstage and the imaging also are pretty decent. The micro and macro details slightly behind that, and resolution as well on the same level, slightly behind the soundstage and the imaging. So I would say definitely soundstage, imaging, and tone and tonality end up being the most competent technical features. Although, like I said, I did find the timbre and tonality to be a little bit on the colored side, a little bit overemphasized with certain instruments. Let me see here, something else that I might be missing. No, that's in a nutshell basically it. And this is just a minor little comparison here with the Okavango, and not in any way a full comparison, because that's not the purpose. I brought out here the Okavango because this was the, let's say, the previous hybrid that was on that kind of similar price point, although there is $100 difference here. The Okavango and the Cano Cristales are perfect complements to each other. They are two totally different approaches to sound. The Okavango is, by comparison, significantly more neutral, even though you do have the ability to have those switches. So for those of you that do have the Okavango and that wanted to try a different flavor from Hisenior, definitely the Cano Cristales is a solid option, without a question. For those that have the Okavango and that like the Okavango style of sound, then the Cano Cristales will not be for you. For those that are, for example, fans of, like I mentioned, the Tancio Mirai, the 10th anniversary, or the DTE 264 from Soundrime, this falls within that category of IEM. So it's an IEM which has a tuck style of bass, not a gliding style of bass. It has a pinna gain which is relatively intense, that it peaks at close to about 3K and then drops off from there onwards. Anyway, I'll just quickly show you the graph and we'll wrap it up. Okay, so here we have the graph for the Cano Cristales. Let me quickly just take away some of these other graphs here so they don't get in the way, and you guys can better understand what we are talking about here. Okay, so Cano Cristales. As I mentioned, it's got that tuck style of bass, tucks in at around 200 kilohertz. By doing it this way, the bass, although like I said, it's lush, it's thick, it doesn't in any way let's say, crowd the mids, and the mids are clean and detailed, and at mid to low volumes, like I mentioned before, there's really nothing that I can point as a negative aspect. It's then when you start pushing the volume that the way that the mids scale as compared to the bass, they scale in a manner which then make the sound that comes across be very much V-shaped. So you kind of notice there's a little bit of a lack of detail here in this area between 200 and let's say 1.5 kilohertz, which it's not really an issue, let's say, with certain genres, only if you like listening to a lot of vocal stuff. But it's more the fact that then this peak, or the way that this initial pinna is being tuned, it makes the upper mids here in this 3, 4, 5 kilohertz sound just a little bit unpolished, and again, this is by no means a criticism to Hisenior. It's just me calling things the way they should be called. For many of you that will listen to the Hisenior, to the Cano Cristales, you will probably disagree with me and say, no, Tony, I think it's fine, it's perfectly matched. And here lies the beauty of this hobby. I mean, what for me sounds amazing might not be the same for others, and vice versa. And so I think the takeaway message here is, For me personally, for the genres of music that I like listening, and I'll post the playlist, as you guys can see, with jazz, with that I like listening, where you have a lot of wind instruments and so on, with some vocals that I like listening to. The Cano Cristales was absolutely flawless. No real any lack of any performance really, but on occasion it was just a little bit too much, and it was more down to the unpolish of the lack of finesse. That was it. And again, let me make this perfectly clear. This is me personally, okay? Anyway, as you can see, then it starts dropping off, and then the highs, or in my opinion, done in a manner which is very much equal to what we have here in terms of the bass, in terms of energy, and they scale basically the same. It's this area here that scales just a little bit more forward in regards to the others, and then some detail past 10k. The lack of detail past 10k is relative, because like I said, the soundstage and imaging are really good. It sounds really big, the Cano Cristales, in my opinion. It's more the micro details that sometimes are slightly lacking, but again, like I said earlier, I think that this was a smart approach, not make the highs be too overpowering so that they don't sound out of context and maybe overcolored, so cymbals sound like cymbals, in my opinion, and I really didn't find any lack of energy with regards to that. Again, I repeat, maybe some of you will find some lack of energy because you are having well, not only a better hearing capability than mine, but you are preferring a more technically oriented sound, because at the end of the day, the sound of the Cano Cristales, and this is something that I should have mentioned earlier, the sound of the Cano Cristales is a sound which is pending towards being more on the musical than on the technical side, although, as I said, the technical aspects of it are not bad, but it's a more musical, it's if you want to call it a kind of a powerful organic type of sound, okay? Very much like what you get from public address speakers, let's put it that way. I think that would be the best analogy that I can make. The Cano Cristales comes across as an IEM that is similar in terms of sound to public address speakers. So a good public address system like an electro voice system or a Celestian system, they're capable of sounding really loud, clean, detailed, and just occasionally just misses a beat here and there. That's the best way I think I can put the Cano Cristales. Overall, what is my opinion of the Cano Cristales in terms of who that it's intended for? I think I've just mentioned it. It's for those of you that like a powerful sound, because that's what it's capable of. It's an IEM that doesn't need much volume to play really loud. And if you like listening to things with a certain volume, definitely the Cano Cristales fills in that prerequisite. So it's not for those that are wanting a more neutral correctness in terms of the sound and ultimate balance. No, it's a fun, engaging, powerful, energetic, organic type of presentation. It's there. It's not ashamed of making itself known that it's there. Yeah, that's basically it. Okay, guys, as always, like and subscribe. If there's any questions you want to ask, please feel free to do so. And if there's any comparisons that you want me to do, let me know, and also take care of that. Thank you now. Bye bye.